Hope you are watching videos and also the reading thing. Okay, so control flow. So control flow is also something called decision making. How do you make decisions in Python? What do you use to make decisions? So basically in Python, if we are going to decide what's going to happen, we check for a particular condition. Okay, we know how to check for conditions using the using the equal to, the equal sign, the equality sign, the less than, greater than or equals. And also we have seen how to check for multiple conditions. If there are multiple conditions, you have to check how to use the first condition and another condition. So condition 1 and condition 2, or condition 1 or condition 3, or you use a node like that. So we have seen how to test for conditions. Then we have also seen how to test for multiple conditions. The reason why we did that is because we want to be in a position to test for a particular condition, and if a particular condition turns out to be true, then we can actually do something. Okay, so this is what is known as control flow. You are changing how Python is going to carry out conditions, how it's going to carry out certain tasks, is going to execute lines of code. With control flow or decision making, not every line of your program is going to be run. Only those conditions, only those lines which come after a particular condition has been met are what are going to be run, and we're going to see how to do this. There's basically one way. Some programming languages have got multiple ways of doing this, but in Python there's just one way of doing this, and that is by using what is known as an if. Then this elif is short for else if, then else. So basically what you're saying, we start with the if statement. Okay, so what you're saying is you test for a condition here. This is how it works. So you say if, you type if, then after the if you put a space. You put that space, then you test for a condition. Okay, you put a space, then you test for a condition. Then after the condition, how do you tell Python that you're finished writing a condition? You put a colon at the end. So you start with if, then space, then the condition. This condition can be one condition you're testing for, a conditional test you're testing for, or it can be many conditions. So if you're testing for multiple conditions, then we know how to do that by using those and or, depending on what you need to do. So if the condition turns out to be true, then you say under this, you say execute this code. So you have got certain lines of Python you have written. Say these are the lines of code which the computer needs to carry out if the condition is true. Are we clear?
Yes.
So Python is going to test this condition, and like we saw last week, if a condition is tested, there is one of two results. Either that condition is true or that condition is false. If the condition is tested, then it turns out to be true. Then Python is going to do something else. It's going to execute whatever lines are under the if condition. On the other hand, a condition can be tested, then it turns out to be false. If a condition is false, Python will not execute these lines of computer code which are under the if. So the lines of code you put under the if condition are only going to be executed if the condition you're testing for turns out to be true. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you know which lines of code are going to be added to, are going to be part of your condition? Remember when we were writing functions? Then as you start writing a function, you say def, then the name of the function, then whatever information the function should receive. Then at the end you put a colon. Then after the colon there was some space which was put like this. There was a space like this. Then you start typing whatever your function is supposed to do. The same thing happens here. So when you say if, you start with an if. So Python says, okay, this person is trying to tell me to test for the particular condition. Then whatever condition it is, then when you put your colon there, then you press enter. Then what's going to come next is Python is going to create some space where you're going to type those things which are supposed to be, what is supposed to be done if that particular condition is true. So let's start with the following. I have this string. As you can see, it's red, meaning that it's a string. It's in quotation marks. So enter the temperature of water in degrees Celsius. So I'll be asking for the temperature of water. Then Python is going to display this message. Then the person who is trying to use this thing, they will enter the temperature of water. Then this string is going to be stored in the prompt like that. Okay, so now here I ask the user for the temperature of water. And how do I do that? I use the input function, because this is the function you use to ask someone for a specific piece of information. In this case, is the temperature of water in degrees Celsius. That information will be stored in temperature, and since it's going to be stored in temperature, after it's stored in temperature, I'll change what has been stored in temp. I'll change it into a number. Right now, it's not going to be a number; it's going to be a string. So I'll change it into a number. Then after I've changed it into a number, then I can test the following condition. What am I checking for? Check if temperature is greater than or equals to 100 degrees Celsius. So I say, if temp, which is the temperature I've entered, is greater than or equals to 100. This is the condition I'm testing for. Have you seen how we write it? If, this is the same kind of thing we're doing last week, where we're just writing tests, and the answers were always true or false, true or false, true or false, like that. So this temp greater or equals to 100, that is the test, conditional test we're carrying out. So if it turns out that the person who is using this piece of thing enters a temperature which is greater than 100, then this condition is going to be true. If this condition is going to be true, then this line is going to be executed. So you see, water is gaseous. Okay. On the other hand, if the temperature which has been entered is less than 100, then this condition is going to be false. Okay, because if temp is less than 100, we are testing for temp greater than 100, temp equals to 100. So if it's not equals to 100 or it's not greater than 100, then this condition is going to give us a false. If it gives us a false, then nothing happens. Are we clear?
Yes.
So, depending on what the result of the test is, this print water is gaseous is going to be carried out only if this condition is true. If the condition is not true, then Python is not going to carry out the statement. So we are controlling which pieces of code are going to be run and which pieces of code are not going to be run. Okay, so I run this. So this is what you see. Enter the temperature of water in degrees Celsius. So I'll enter that the temperature of water is 120 degrees. If it's 120 degrees, then this is what is printed. So here, this 120 degrees, which I've entered because I've been asked to do it here, is stored in this temp. Then this temp, every time you get information using input, that information is stored as a string. That's why we change that, the value which is in temp, we change it into a float and store it back. So now basically what we're checking here is if temp is greater than or equals to 100 degrees. At the moment, temp has a value of 150. So 150 greater than 100, that is true. 150 equals to 100, that is false. So you're saying 150 greater than 100 or equals to 100. So one of them is true. So because one of them is true, we're saying greater than or equals to 100, then this statement turns out to be true and it is executed. Have you seen how it works?
Yes.
Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Okay, next again, I can run this with a different temperature. Okay, instead, I'm going to run it with the temperature of 80 degrees. So the temperature is 80 degrees, and after I run it, you can see nothing happens. The reason why nothing happens is because right now, this temp has a value of 80. So I say if temp is greater than or equals to 100, 80 is the value in temp. So 80 greater than 100, that's false. 80 equals to 100, that's false. So both conditions greater than or equals to 100 are false. So at the end of the day, this test turns out to be false. So if the test turns out to be false, then the statement under the tests in the if is not carried out. That's why you haven't seen anything here. It's not that Python didn't check, it checked, but the condition was false. So it didn't carry out anything. Are we clear?
Yes.
Next, I rerun this
Yes.
with a value of 100. So we started with 150, we went to 80, then we got to 100. If we put a value of temperature of 100, that's what we get. Water is gaseous. So here the temp has a value of 100. So we come here, we check if temp is greater than or equals to 100. So if temp has a value of 100, temp greater than 100, that's false. Temp equals to 100, that's true. So there's a true and there's a false and a true. So since it's temperature greater than or equals to 100, this is true. Therefore, Python proceeds to print out this statement. Is it clear how this works?
Yes.
Okay. So this has got limitations because things only get printed out if the test is true. What if the test is false, but you still want to do something? Okay. If the test is false, right now we just say if, the way it is here. If condition, then do this. This code is only run if the condition is true. But what if the condition is false? Right now we're not doing anything. If the condition is false, nothing is happening. Okay, we don't do anything. But if you want to do something because the condition, the test you have carried out has turned out to be false, it's still possible for you to do that. And you do that by adding what is known as an else statement. So this is how it goes. Say if condition, you test for a condition, then after you finish writing your condition, you put the colons at the end there. If the condition is true, this is what's going to be executed. Okay. However, if the condition is false, you also want to do something about that. So you say else. Now the else does not have a condition. Okay? The else does not have a condition. Just say else, then after the else you put your columns there. Then you do this. So this code which comes after the else is what is supposed to be executed if the temperature or if the condition is false. So now we have got two things. We have what's supposed to be done if the condition is true. We also have what should be done if the condition is not true. Are we clear?
Yes.
So we are covered in both cases. If the condition is true, this is what we want to do. If the condition is false, this is what we want to do. So we go back to our same temperature thing where we ask the user for the temperature, then we change the temperature from a string into a number. So here we check if the temperature is greater than or equals to 100. So if the temperature is greater than or equals to 100, then we want Python to print out this statement. Water is gaseous. If the temperature is less than 100, else if the temperature is less than 100, then we want to print out the statement. Water is not gaseous. So we want to cover ourselves. If the temperature is 100, greater than or equals to 100, Python should say water is gaseous. It has changed into a vapor. Okay? Then if the temperature is equal to 100, we also say water has changed into a vapor. If the temperature is less than 100, we want to say Well, water hasn't changed into a vapor. So we start with a higher temperature, 150. So we enter a temperature of 150, and that's what we get. Water is gaseous. So here we store a temperature of 150, then we check here. Temp greater than or equals to 150. Temp has got a value of 150. This is true. So we print out water as gaseous. Once this is printed out, this is not evaluated. We don't look at this anymore. Once a condition is true, then whatever is in under the if has been printed, has been worked out. What comes after the else and everything else is not looked at. Are we clear?
Yes.
The thing which comes after the else is only looked at in the event that the temperature, the condition is false. But if the condition is true, only the stuff which comes under the if is done. What comes after the else is not done. Okay, so that's what you get. Or for a temperature of 150, then we run this for a temperature of 100 again. For 100, if you run that, it tells you water is gaseous. So again, if the temperature is 100, so we come here, temperature greater than 100, that's false. Temperature equals to 100, that's true. So you've got a part of this condition which is true, the other one is false. Since it's true or false, greater than or equals to, then this thing turns out to be true, then we print this for 100. If you run it for a temperature of 80, if we do for 80, then we get something else. So now temperature is 80, so temperature greater than or equals to 100, this is false. For a value of 80, for temperature of 80, this is false. If this is false, then this condition is not executed, because you only execute things under the if it's true. But what's going to be run now is what comes after the else. Print water is not gaseous. Are we clear how this works?
Yes.
Rachel, is it clear? Huh? Rachel?
Me, I'm not clear. My network wasn't okay, so I didn't get you correctly. I didn't get you clearly. I'm saying I didn't get you clearly.
Where did you not get?
Hello?
Yes. So this, have you seen how this example worked out?
I'm asking if you could just go through from where it's saying ask user for temperature of water, the inputs there, starting
Okay.
from there. Where you add the else, that's why I didn't get it clear.
So we start with a temperature of we started with a higher temperature of 150. Here we added the temperature of 150. We entered the temperature of 150, and this is what we got. So how did the computer do this? Okay, so when we add a temperature of 150, it's stored in here as a string, then we change it into a number. Okay, so we test for temp greater than or equals to 100. Since we have a value of 150 in here, 150 greater than 100, that's true. 150 equals to 100, that's false. So a part of this condition is true, the other one is false. Since it's greater than or equals to, then this thing evaluates to true. Therefore, this bit is carried out. That's what is supposed to be carried out if the condition is true. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we run this code again for a temperature of 100 degrees. There. Again, it says water is gaseous. Okay? So now we have a temperature value of 100. So we come here. Temperature greater than or equals to 100. So the value is 100. 100 greater than or equals to 100. So 100 greater than 100, that's false. But 100 equals to 100, that's true. So this condition turns out to be true. And this statement is carried out. Water is gaseous. That's why you're seeing this. Okay? So this statement is only carried out if the condition is true. If this condition is true, that's when it's carried out. But the moment this condition turns out to be false, then this statement is not going to be carried out. It will be ignored, but because we have added an else statement, an else, and what is supposed to be done, what comes after the else is what's going to be printed out. So in this case, we run it again. We put a temperature of 80 degrees. When you put a temperature of 80 degrees, what is printed now is this. Water is not gaseous. It's what this here. That's what is carried out. This is not printed out. And how did that happen? So here we had a temperature of 80. So 80 greater than or equals to 100. So 80 greater than 100, that's false. 80 equals to 100, that's false. So both cases, greater than or equals to 100, that's false. So this condition turns out to be false. So if the condition is false, we do not carry out this statement under the if, but we carry out what comes after the else, which is water is not gaseous. Is that clear? Is this clear?
Kindly repeat the last part. My network was breaking.
The last bit says if this condition is false, the temperature, as you can see, is 80. Okay? 80 greater than 100 is false because 80 is not greater than 100. 80 equals to 100. 80 greater than 100, that's false. 80 equals to 100, that's false. So both the condition 80 greater than or equals to 100 gives us a false. Okay? Is that clear?
Yep. Yes, it is.
If the condition is false, then what is carried out, what Python does is it comes to the else. Okay? If the condition is false, then Python skips everything here. It jumps to the else. Okay? Then it checks if there is anything under that else. And if it finds something, that's what it's going to do. So in this case, because 80 is greater than 100 is false, and 80 equals to 100 is false, so which makes the condition to be false, Python skips everything else. It comes to the else bit here. And it prints out this statement telling you that water is not gaseous. Is this clear?
Yes, it is.
Rachel? Rachel, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So that is what you can do when you only have one condition to test. Okay. When you only have one condition to test, you can tell Python, check, fine, this is the condition I want you to test. So you say, if the condition is true, this is what we should do. And if it's false, that is what we should do. But sometimes you want to test for more than one condition. Okay? And for each of these conditions you're testing for, you want to carry out a different task. So if you want to test for more than one condition, what you use is something called the elif. This elif is short for else if. Okay? Are we clear? The elif is short for else if.
Yes.
So this allows you to test for different types of conditions, and as these different types of conditions are being tested, you want to do different things. So for example, here, you always start with an if. So you start with if, then the first condition you want to test. So condition 1. If condition 1 is true, then this is what you should do. Execute this code. Okay? However, if condition 1 is not true, what do you want to do? You don't just want to stop. Okay? You also want to test for another condition. That's where this thing comes in. Says, else if condition 2 is true, execute this code. Then after that, if condition number 2 is true, you can execute this code, but condition number 2 might also not be true. So if condition number 2 is not true, then you come to the else. What should be done if both condition 1 and condition 2 are not true? Are we clear?
Yes.
So you start with an if, you test for the first condition. That first condition can be true or false because there are only two outcomes. The first condition can be true or false. If the first condition is true, you tell Python this is what you should do. If the first condition is false, you just don't want to stop. You want to test for another condition. That's where this thing comes in. Else if, test for condition 2. If condition 2 is true, then this is what you want to do. Execute this code. Okay? But if condition 2 is also not true, then you tell Python, okay, just do this. Are we clear?
Yes.
Okay, so in the case of this same temperature thing of water thing we're doing, we can test if the water is gas, we can test if the water is liquid, or we can test if the water is ice. So we're going to test for water is gas. If the water is gas, if the water is not gas, then we test if the water is liquid. If the water is not liquid, then there's only one other thing left, which is the water should be ice. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can actually carry out multiple tests. You can carry out multiple tests. Okay, so that's what we have here. So here, again, we're asking for the temperature. The person is going to give us a temperature, then we store the temperature as a number. So start with this if here. So we test if the temperature we have been given is greater than or equals to 100. If that's the case, then fine. We print out that water is gaseous. However, if the temperature we have been given is not greater than or equals to 100, we also want to test if that temperature we have been given is greater than 0 degrees. Okay? This is the other test we want to do. We want to test if the temperature we have been given is greater than 0 degrees. So if else temperature is greater than 0 degrees, if this is true, then we want to say the water is liquid. Else, if the temperature we have been given is not greater than 0 degrees, okay, meaning that this temperature is 0 degrees or this temperature is less than 0 degrees, then we want to say the water is ice. Is this clear?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll run our code again. See, temperature, we enter the temperature. So we'll start with 150. That tells us that water is gaseous. That tells us that the water is gaseous. Okay. So, yeah, temperature is greater than or equals to 100. This is true. And water is gaseous. After it prints out water is gaseous, everything else here is not looked at. Python does not check whether the temperature is greater than 0. It won't, because the first condition has already been met. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Next, we check if the temperature of the water is equal to 100. Again, here, temperature, so we have a value of 100 in here. Temperature greater than 100, that's false. Temperature equals to 100, that's true. Okay, so that's why it prints out the water is gaseous thing. This is left out. It's skipped. Just stops there. Then we move on to our other temperature we were working with, a temperature of 80 degrees. We press enter. When you press enter there, here, so the temperature value is now 80. So temperature greater than or equals to 100. Basically saying 80 greater than 100, that's false. 80 equals to 100, that's false. So this is not carried out. Since this condition is false, we test for another condition, which is the one which comes after the else if. Now we test for temperature greater than 0. So basically that is 80 greater than 0. That is true. So if that is true, then we carry out this. We print out this. Water is liquid, and that is what you're seeing here. Okay? This is not looked at because this condition here is true, and we have carried out what we have been taught to do under that particular condition. Are we clear?
Yes.
If we run this again, but with a temperature of 0, okay, when water is at 0 degrees, with the temperature of 0, when we run that, so we start now temp is 0. Okay, the temperature value is 0. So temperature greater than or equals to 0 than 100. 0 greater than or equals to 100, this is false. So this condition is false. Since this condition is false, the statement under this condition, which is water is gaseous, is not carried out. We then carry out another test. Okay, this one here. Else if temp is greater than 0, but the value of temperature you have entered is 0. So you're saying 0 greater than 0. 0 greater than 0, that's false, because 0 is not greater than 0. Because this condition is false, then this statement is not carried out. Okay, so both tests, test 1, condition number 1, condition number 2, both of them are false. Are we clear?
Yes.
Since our two conditions are false, the only thing left is the else. So we check under the else. What is there to do? That's where we get the water is ice. So this shows how you can test for multiple conditions and at the same time covering yourself. What should be done if condition number 1 fails? If condition number 1 is true, this should be done. If condition number 1 fails, you can also test for another condition using an else if. Okay, you test condition number 2. If condition number 2 is true, this should be done. If condition number 2 is false, then you can put an else. Say, okay, fine, if these two conditions fail, then this should be done. Are we clear?
Yes.
Do we have any questions so far?
Clear so far for me.
Brian?
Clear. It's clear.
Okay, that's nice. You are not restricted to only one else if. Okay? You are not restricted to only one else if. You can have as many else if statements as you want. Here, you can use as many else if statements as you want. However, You can only have one if, one else, and as many else if statements as you want. Are we clear? You have one if, so the if condition here, the if, say if you have one, you can only have one if, then you test for a condition, then you put a colon. If that condition is true, this is what's supposed to be done. If the condition number 1 is false, you can test for another condition. You can say else if condition 2. If condition 2, then you put a colon at the end. If condition 2 is true, then you carry out this task. Okay? If condition 2 is false also, you can test for another condition. You can say else if condition 3. Then you test for condition 3. If condition 3 is true, you carry out this task under condition 3. If condition 3 is false, then you can test another condition, say else if condition 4. Then you carry out a thing. So you can continue testing for conditions. Okay? If the previous condition turns out to be false, you can continue to test for conditions, and once you're tired of testing for conditions, you can tell us, okay, fine, if all these conditions I'm testing for, they turn out to be false, then this is what is supposed to be done. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see how we're going to use this. So again, coming to the same water, we can say water which has a temperature of 100 and above, that's gaseous. Water which has a temperature equal to 35 and above, we can say that water is hot. Water which has a temperature greater than or equal to 20 degrees, we can say that water is lukewarm. Water which has a temperature greater than 0, we can say that water is cold, or else we can say the water is ice. So we can test for multiple conditions like this. Okay, so for example, we have seen the output of a temperature of 150, a temperature of 100, a temperature of 80. So I'll try a temperature of 40, then 25, then something like that. So let's start with the temperature of 40. There. I enter 40 there. Then it tells me water is hot. How did it come to this conclusion? How did the code come to the conclusion that the water is hot? Okay, so what happened? So when you enter the 40, it is stored in temp here as a number. Then we test here. The first test we carry out is with the if. So we test if temperature is greater than or equals to 100. A temperature of 40 greater than or equals to 100, that's a false. So the first condition is not true. Are we clear?
Yes.
The first condition is not true. So if the first condition is not true, everything under the first condition there is not done. We test for the next condition. Else if temperature is greater than or equals to 35 degrees. So the value of temperature is 40. 40 greater than 35, that is true. 40 equals to 45, that's false. So this condition is true. 40 is greater than 35. So that this condition is true. If this condition is true, then this statement is printed out. Water is hot. Once a condition we are testing among these many conditions turns out to be true, all these other conditions are ignored. They are skipped. Is that clear? The rest of them,
Yes.
they are skipped because something has turned out to be true, and the code associated with that true condition has been carried out. So the rest of them below there are skipped. I'll change the temperature to something 23 degrees. Okay, so 23 degrees, if your water is at 23 degrees, then it says water is lukewarm. How did it do this? So we have a temperature value of 23 in here. So temp greater than or equals to 100. 23 greater than 100, that's false. 23 equals to 100, that's false. So basically the first condition is not true. Okay, then we come here. Temp greater than or equals to 35. 23 greater than 35, that's false. 23 equals to 35, that's false. So this condition also is not true. So whatever comes with this condition is skipped. Then we come to our third condition here. Temp greater than or equals to 20. 23 greater than 20, that's true. 23 equals to 20, that's false. So here this one evaluates to true. So this condition turns out to be true, and this statement is carried out. Everything after that is skipped. That's why you end up with water is lukewarm here. Is this clear?
Yes.
Rachel? Rachel, is it clear?
Clear, sir.
Okay. Next, we try out a temperature, very cold temperature. Let's say, for
Yes,
example,
it is.
okay, we try out a temperature of, let's say, 1 degree. The temperature is 1 degree. The temperature is 1 degree, then what's the output? Water is cold. So how did it do that? So we stored the value of temperature 1 degree here. So temp greater than or equals to 100, 1 degree greater than or equals to 100, this is false. This condition is false, so whatever is here is skipped. Then we test for another condition, temp greater than or equals to 35. So 1 greater than or equals to 35, that's false. So this condition is false. So whatever comes with this condition is skipped. Then next, we come here, temp, else if, temperature greater than or equals to 20. So 1 greater than or equals to 20, again, this is false. So whatever comes with this condition is now skipped this time around. Then we test for this other condition here, else if temperature greater than 0, 1 greater than 0, this is true, and we print out this statement, water is cold. What comes after that is skipped. Is this clear?
Yes.
So this is how you carry out conditions, testing, and decision making with Python. You actually have to test conditions. If you want to have got multiple things you want to test, that's fine. If you want to combine your conditions into multiple conditions being tested at the same time, that's fine. As long as it's a condition, you have one if. You can have as many else if statements as you want, and one else if something has to be done at the end after all these you want something to be done after all these conditions have failed, then you can put an else at the end. For example, in the following, when we enter a temperature of 0, when you enter a temperature of 0, all these conditions are going to fail. Temperature greater than or equals to 100, 0 greater than or equals to 100, that's going to fail. That's false. Temperature greater than or equals to 35, that's false. Temperature greater than or equals to 20, that's false. Then this one here, temperature greater than 0, 0 greater than 0, that's false. So even this one fails. So all the conditions we have put, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the 4 conditions we have put, they fail. Okay? So when all your conditions fail, then you want to have a safeguard. Say, okay, fine. If all these things fail, then what else is supposed to be done? That's where this thing comes in. Else, print water is ice. That's why you're seeing the water is ice there. Are we clear?
Yes.
Okay. Next, we want to speak about something called nesting if statements. To nest is to put in a nest, the one for nests associated with beds, okay? The homes for birds, that's where birds put their eggs, okay? So in a nest, when you're nesting an if statement, basically you're putting an if statement inside another if statement. Are we clear? You're putting an if statement inside another if statement. This is what's called nesting. Okay. Now, this can be done, okay? But this is something which is not encouraged. It should only be done if it's the only way to do something and if there is no other way of doing something. Are we clear?
Yes.
This is not encouraged. You should only do it if it is the only way which is available to do something. Otherwise, try to find another way of doing this. Okay. The reason is very simple, and it's as follows, and I'm going to show it. They are guidelines on how you should write your Python program. Okay. If you still remember this import thing, we say import then something else. This thing we are saying import this. When we use import, that's how you get a piece of code or a file called a module. So there's a module in Python called this, and this module contains some guidelines on how you are supposed to write your Python code. There are some simple guidelines on how you're supposed to write some Python code. One of those guidelines, so let's go through these guidelines, okay? So it's called the Zen of Python by Tim Peters. It says beautiful is better than ugly. So basically here we're telling you try to write beautiful Python code. Then explicit is better than implicit. That's also try to be as explicit as possible. Don't assume things. Simple is better than complex. That's okay. Then complex is better than complicated. That's okay. Then there is this bit here. It says flat is better than nested. If it's possible, if at first when you're trying to solve a problem, then you think, oh, I should have an if statement, then inside this if statement I should put another if statement. That's nesting, okay? That complicates things, okay? If there is a way of doing things so that you don't have an if statement inside another if statement, then try to do that. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there is a way of solving a problem without having an if statement inside another if statement, then try to do that. Okay, so here's an example of nesting. I'm going to give you an example of nesting here. There is another way of doing this, but like the way we have been doing with the temperature things, okay? There is a way of doing this. I can show how to do this without nesting, okay? So you can say, someone asks for, so here input, enter the area of a room, okay? So you enter a value, and then that value you're going to store it in area, then since input stores your values as strings, that's fine. Then we'll change that area into a number. Okay, then we'll do the following. If area is greater than 10, okay, if area is greater than 10, you have entered the value of area. So I check if that area is greater than 10, then I check again inside. I say if area is greater than 15. Okay, so what you're seeing here is an if and else if inside an if statement. Are we clear?
Yes.
So you have an if and else if inside an if statement, an if else. Okay, this is not encouraged. If there is a way of doing things, then you should try to do that. Okay, and I'm going to show that it's possible to do this in a different way, like the way we have done the temperature thing. Okay, so you have got this. This is what's referred to as an if statement. So if area is greater than 15, you say room is pretty big. Else room is really big. Else room is pretty big. Area less than, then area less than 10, you say room is pretty small. So you run this. So if your room is, let's say, 20, okay, it says room is really big. So it checks, you put an area of 20 here, then you say area greater than 10, so 20 greater than 10, this is true. So under 20 greater than 10, this is true. Then it checks, okay, this is true. So what am I supposed to do? It finds this, okay, it finds another if here. If area is greater than 15, so it's checking 20 greater than 15. Okay, this is true. Then what should I do? This is what I'm supposed to do. Okay, it prints out room is really big. If it turns out that the area is less than 15 but greater than 10, then it should print out room is really big. Otherwise, print out room is really small. Okay, so it works, but it's not the best way to do something. Are we clear? Putting if inside if other if statements works sometimes, yeah, but it's not the prettiest way of doing something. Are we clear?
Yes, it is.
I can also run it for an area which is, let's say, 12. If the area is 12, it says room is pretty big. I can also run it and say if the area, so if the area is 12, like this, so here we have area being equals to 12, right? So we say if area greater than 10, so the value which is in area is 12, 12 greater than 10, that is true. Then, so this condition is true. Then we check what's under the if. So we say, we find another if inside there. We say area greater than 15, 12 greater than 15, this is false. So this condition turns out to be false now. So we skip this. Then we have an else here. So the else tells us room is pretty big. Okay? So basically that's that. So there is this thing there. You can also have an area which is less than 10. Let's say 7. Room is small. So if your area value is 7, so you say area greater than 10. So 7 greater than 10, this is false. If this is false, then all of this is skipped because all of this belongs to this if statement here. Okay, so since the condition is false, all these things are not checked, then we come to this bit here. Else print room is pretty small. So this is what is known as nesting. Okay, now remember this, flat is better than nested. So if there's a way of doing things, it's better you do it in a flat way than in a nested way. We do not encourage this nested business. Okay, so how else would you do this? So I'll try to do that to show how else we could do this. We could start with this bit. Check if the area is greater than 15. So I start from there. Then I'll do that. If area is greater than 15, then I should print out room is really big. Okay, so that's the first condition. So here someone enters a value of area, then the first thing I do is I check if the area is greater than 15. Okay, this is the first condition. Area is greater than 15. Room is really big. Then the next thing I do is an else if. Else if, okay, so here I say check if area here, yeah, check if area is greater than 10 here. check if area is greater than 10. That's a comment. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the area is greater than 10. So I'll say else if area greater than 10. So if the area is greater than 10, then I want to say room is pretty big. Then I say else area less than 10. So you can see I have rearranged the same problem, okay, but I don't have this if inside an if. I only have one if, then I have an else, one else, then I have an else if, then I have one else. If you look at what we have here, I have got an if, I have got an else, I have got an if, I have got an else. So I've got two ifs and two else. In this other rearranged one, I have got one if, I have got one else if, and one else. This is the same problem. Are we clear?
Yes.
If I run this rewritten one, I give it 20, it will tell me room is really big. Okay? If I give it 12, it will tell me room is pretty small, is pretty big. If I give it the 7 I gave, it tells me room is small. So it's the same thing, but how it has been carried out. This second way of doing it, it's flat. This is what is referred to as a flat way of doing it. It's much better, it's more clearer than this, the nested one. Okay? Are we clear?
Yes.
So the flat version of the code is more clear and neater than the nested version. This is what we want. We want to write things which are clear so that people who are looking at your things, they don't have difficulty trying to figure out what is it you're thinking. And usually the trouble comes in when you have got these if inside another if, then an else inside the same, then another if inside. That creates problems. It creates something called spaghetti stuff, spaghetti code. You are trying to follow spaghetti from this, and like that, and that creates problems. Are we clear?
Yes.
So always find a way. Always try to find a way which is as clear as possible. It doesn't matter how many how many else if conditions you put. You can, as long as you come up with something which is very clear, everyone can follow, then we are all going to be happy. Okay. The other thing you can do with you can use if statements with a list. Okay, you can use if statements with a list in one way. You can use them to check if a list contains something or if that list does not contain a piece of information. If the list is empty or if a list doesn't contain a piece of information. Are we clear?
Yes.
Okay, so now before I do that, there's a piece I need from the last class. There's something I need from the last class. So I decided to cut the thing we looked at last. This one. I decided to cut it into two. Just a minute. So here I was saying that Okay, a list of moons. So this list of moons, I'm going to get it from this. Okay, those are moons. If you remember this from the last class, then we'll try to do a print of our moons. Print our moons. Just a minute. Then, okay. Okay, so what we have here, as you can see, is a list of certain moons which are known in the solar system, okay? And we have printed them out here. Now, we can check for a particular moon, okay, in this list. And how do you check for that? By using what is known as an in keyword. You can say this particular moon, Europa, in moons. If this Europa string is in this list of moons, then we should get a true. If the Europa is not in this list of moons, we should get a false. So when you do this, if you run that, you say Europa in moons, you get a true. So this is a statement which gives us a true or a false statement. True or false. Are we clear? So in this case, it has given us a true statement. So we can actually use this as a condition. So this can become our condition. Since when Python looks at it, it gives a true or a false answer. Are we clear?
Yes.
Yeah, we can use that as a condition. For example, there's another one. There's another moon. I'll put a thing here. Another moon called Io. Now, Io, as we are going to see, yes, it's there. It's a moon in the solar system. Sorry, not Io, but I'll use this one. Not Io, but I'll use this. Bianca. It is a moon in the solar system. But if you look at your list of moons we have, it is not in this list. So here we say Bianca in moons. The answer is false. So by doing this Europa in moons, this is when Python looks at this, it evaluates into a true or a false thing, result. So Europa is there, Bianca is there. And this is what we need for a condition. A condition is something which Python is going to look at and tell you the answer is true or the answer is false. Are we clear?
Yes.
So in this case, we can get this one, Europa in moons, we can get that statement and use it as a condition here. So we say, if Europa in moons, if this turns out to be true, then print the following. Europa is the smallest of the 4 moons orbiting Jupiter. Like that, because it's true. Okay? So there are innovative ways you can use these things. Okay? Then here, you can also do the following. If you remember something we did, checking if the list is empty, you can also use the fact that a list is empty or not as a condition. So for example, if you say moons, you give this list of moons, you give it to Boolean, this function Boolean. Okay? That function Boolean gives you true. Why does it give you true? It gives you true because the list is not empty. Okay? Are we clear? It gives you true because the list
Yes.
is not empty. Okay. Okay. This one we need to just leave it a bit here. We'll move it to the next lesson. Do you have any questions so far? Once you have looked at certain other things. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, so if we have no questions, this first part of our lesson, we'll stop here. Let's meet in 15 minutes so that you can have something. So let's meet at 16:30 so that we start the second part of our lesson, the other things. Okay?
Alright, sir, thank you.
Cheers. So I'll stop sharing.